Hello everyone, today we're going to be talking about PCI requirement 624. This talks about software engineering techniques and other methods in use to develop software in a secure manner. One of the key points about 624 is addressing common vulnerabilities. So let's talk about how we do this and what are some of those common vulnerabilities. So the first big point of 624 is documentation. If you don't have a documentation about how to address common vulnerabilities, so we're talking about things like SQL injection, XSS, CSRF attacks, how do your developers know how to deal with those? So making sure you have documentation that talks about those common vulnerabilities and how the organization is going to address those in their code, whatever method they use, is really important as part of your overall software development program to make sure that you are addressing appropriately these common vulnerabilities in your software. Now, PCI and 624 kind of identifies a lot of different areas that could be common vulnerabilities in software that we develop in-house. And we're talking about custom bespoke software here. So kind of the first part of it, we're talking about the age-old thing like SQL injection, LDAP attacks, things like that. Those have been around for decades, and they have been used to great success in the past, and they're still prevalent today. Then we have kind of attacks on data structure. How is an organization going to deal with attempts to manipulate buffers and things like that? Then we have attacks on cryptography. So one of the things that came out recently, or not recently, but in the last couple of years, was the attacks on TLS 1.0 and 1.1. They've been shown to be cryptographically weak. So how is the organization going to deal with that? Then there's attacks on business logic. So when we develop these custom and bespoke pieces of software, there is logic in those pieces of software that has the potential to be exploited by bad actors. So we need to make sure that as an organization, we have the documentation about how we're going to address that. Then we have the access control mechanisms. So this is probably the key number one thing out there that gets attacked all the time. We're talking about users. Users have access to the data that's inside. So if that user gets compromised and there's for some reason someone is able to escalate credentials to something they're not supposed to, then suddenly you have a very large problem on your hands. So making sure that the access control system is appropriately restricting access to least privilege is going to be important. Then we have any other kind of high-risk vulnerabilities that are defined by the organization and identified via either scanning or some other means. How are you going to deal with those and remediate those high-risk vulnerabilities? So to meet this requirement, we need to not only have the documentation, but we need to make sure that our personnel also understand what's going on. So as we've kind of been talking about with all of requirement 6, having that documentation and having that backed up with the appropriate training for personnel is going to be really critical for an organization to meet requirement 624.